Thanks everyone for coming. My name is Andres Monroy Hernandez. I'm a faculty member in the computer science department, and I have the pleasure to introduce Professor Maurice Naaman. He's coming from Cornell Tech. Maurice has an illustrious career in different aspects of computer science, from Stanford PhD to working at one of the earlier social media tech companies, Yahoo, where he was in a research lab there, doing really cool stuff around Flickr and bunch of early social media platforms that you probably have not heard of if you're younger than many of us. And then he went and joined Rutgers, where he created a whole new lab around social media technologies and designs. He then founded a company called Scene that actually I used for a few research projects. And now he's at Cornell Tech, where he's doing some excellent work on a variety of things, including what we are going to hear today on human AI connections, what do you call it? AI-mediated communication. Yeah, I'm very excited to hear from more. And one fun fact about more is that he was a professional basketball player for Israel, right? So, you know, cool experience they had. Right. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today. So in recent years, there have been a rapid proliferation of artificial intelligence applications in various aspects of human life. I'm blocking the screen. I'll move. I didn't want to sit down, but I'll try to be equal. From health and education to finance and transportation, with the increasing presence of AI in our lives, it's inevitable that AI will also mediate our communication with each other. This raises a number of questions about how AI-mediated communication will reshape human-to-human communication, relationships, and language. In this talk, I will explore some of the potential ways in which AI-mediated communication could reshape human communication and relationship, as well as some of the ethical concerns that this raises. One potential way that AI-mediated communication can impact our communication is by impacting the level of trust that we have in one another. And to consider this, you just need to think about this. Everything I just said since taking up the podium, except the blocking the screen stuff, has been written by AI. In fact, it was written by the GPT-3, move over here, hopefully still on the camera, DaVinci 002 model, based on a prompt. I gave it the abstract for the talk, and I said, write an introduction for it. And I didn't do that to showcase the capabilities of the large language models that many of you, I'm sure, are aware of. I wrote this, I used this to demonstrate how it may undermine the trust that you, the audience, have in me, the speaker. Now that you know that your very first impression of me was created, augmented, generated really by AI, is it going to really, it's going to impact your impression of me of the rest of this talk? Are you going to trust me less? Are you going to maybe discount my performance, or maybe overvalue my performance? And what if you didn't know, but only suspected that my first few slides had text that was written or supported by AI? And it's even worse. What are you going to think about the next speaker? Esther is speaking tomorrow. But maybe someone with an accent like myself, or maybe delivers a speech in eloquent English, or maybe actually has some repetitive content and something that's a little awkward. If you notice my first few sentences repeated human communication a lot, it was not the most smooth text. So are you going to suspect that they use AI? And if you do, are you going to discount their performance? Or maybe we'll all come to expect that people will use AI when they present or when they correspond with each other, just like you expect people to use a spell check in professional communication today. So trust is just one example. This talk is not just about trust, but it will be trust and trustworthiness will be something that we'll come back to later in the talk. But generally, it's about how AI, as increasingly capable agent in our human-to-human exchanges, can shape and impact our language, our relationship, our communication, in our society, perhaps in multiple ways. But first, let me actually define AI-mediated communication. The phrase is actually building on the concept and the decade-old academic interest of computer-mediated communication. So traditionally, we had computer-mediated communication that assumed that we have a sender that adapts message to a channel, transmit that message, The message is received by a receiver that then interprets the message. They understand the channel, maybe they understand the communication patterns and all that. But the message, text or email, synchronous or asynchronous, will be pretty much understood to be delivered the way the sender created it and authored by the sender. Now, we increasingly have AI-mediated communication, where we have communication channel where an AI agent participates in a communication act, maybe suggests edits, suggests modifications, maybe generates the entire communication on our behalf. So we call this AIMC, AI-mediated communication. And I'll give you some examples right now of what AIMC is, starting with an example that is used by billions of people every day. I'm sure you used it today, which is Google's smart replies. They exist now in many other email, text applications. So here, my student Maurice is asking for feedback about the dissertation proposal, and Google highlights some potential responses. It's almost perfect. Autocomplete is another example, right? When you start typing and it autocompletes a sentence for you, we'll see some other both smart replies and autocompletes examples researched today. We have Grammarly and other services that give you feedback about how your text might sound to other readers, so you can adjust it. We have now new services that generates entire emails or any other text on your behalf, including, for example, one can ask it to create nicely crafted happy birthdays with some specific text. We didn't get it. I'm not part of the Princeton community, but I'm sure the Princeton community is happy you're part of it, Andres.
Did it include the emoji?
No, I added the cake for emphasis. So it's not just email. For example, LinkedIn already will generate your profile summary text for you, and I'll go back to profile summaries in the talk today. And it's also not just text. Audio, for example, there are already companies that are offering accent shift for live, in this case, customer service talks with all the problems that it may raise. Future AI services can remove my Israeli accent and maybe make me sound more like the King of England. Or maybe, we're on a Zoom call with a remote participant. It can shift my accent to match every single person's accent on the Zoom call to make me maybe more relatable to them or maybe more understandable. So that's why we called it AIMC. Our definition had to do with some kind of an outcome, right? So we called AIMC, defined it in these papers as interpersonal communication, optimized, augmented, or even generated by algorithms to achieve specific communicative or relational outcomes. So action shift, right, is the outcome that I get, perhaps trust me more or relate to me more or understand me better. Of course, we've seen increasingly in the last few months, AI-generated images that are more and more realistic and available to consumers. So here, I'm not actually sure, but I think this is real. It may actually be a prank, but it's not far from reality, where you can go on a website, give it 40 photos of yourself, and it will generate your LinkedIn pack or your Tinder pack or whatever pack you want.
I've used it.
Oh, it's real. Okay,
Wow.
thank you. I don't want to ask which service to use. And we'll of course come back to why that matters later. Even in online synchronous video, this now happens. This is a very simple example of NVIDIA's shift. So they gaze on the Zoom call. They can shift you to look like you looking at the camera. But again, filters like that can make you look more trustworthy by maybe blending your face to the face of the receiver, or do many other, make you more attractive. So many other things are possible already with these filters. So as the title of the talk suggests, all these AI-mediated communication techniques are standing to reshape our communication. And the rest of this talk, I'll show you some of the evidence that we have produced in multiple studies of the different effects. For example, I will show you the impact it has on language. I will show you that it causes positivity shift, at least the current iterations of the language suggestions. I'll show you that it can cause content shift, so it can make us shift the content that we write based on the AI suggestions. It can even persuade us in some way, change our opinions. I'll share that study as well. And finally, I'll briefly mention about how it changes our feeling about ownership to the content that we write, like when we have AI suggest or write content for us. That will be the first part of the talk. The second part, I'll talk about the impact it might have on our social relationships. So I'll show how it can change how we blame each other when conversations fail, and how AI can help in communication, so make people communication more smooth, but also make people distrust one another when they suspect AI has been involved. And given the importance of the perception of AI on how people trust each other, I'll also take a short detour and show you what makes people think content was written by AI. What does the perception of AI look like? When do they think something is AI and something is human? And finally, given all this new evidence, I'll discuss some of the implications for our society and culture. And just one note, I'm mostly going to stay in the text domain that really has emerged over the last 3 years when we started doing this research. But now it's increasingly available, as I mentioned, for images, for video, live and asynchronous. So I'll come back to that at the end. Just for credits, this is most of the studies, all of the studies I think I'll talk about today were done as a part of the NSF-funded Stanford Cornell project with PhD students across 3 beautiful campuses in Ithaca, Stanford, and Cornell Tech in New York City. I'll mostly go into details of my work with Maurice, but I'll also mention work led by Hannah and Jess. Maurice, by the way, is graduating and is looking for postdocs or faculty positions in Europe, Esther. Anyone else who happens to be here. Okay, let's start with the impact on language. And I'll cover most of this pretty quickly, but dive more deeply to one of the studies. So as you've seen earlier, right, some of the suggestions that I got from Maurice, I'm not zooming into them here, were overly positive, right? So looks great, I think it's perfect, and so forth. So a couple of the studies that we did try to actually capture this positivity and see if it actually affects people who respond, because you'd imagine that this will affect not only the people who chose them, but may also kind of prime people who are not choosing those to use more positive language. So just briefly mention a couple of studies. This is from Hannah at Stanford. She did a study where there was a communication task in the lab with 35 or so dyads, and they used Google Hangouts. And in that study, she looked at how the positive language of when people just use their own text, when they use the smart replies, or when they use smart replies and augmented them. In a different study from Jess at Cornell, here she had 219 pairs discuss an issue, policy issue online. And they either had smart replies from Google, smart replies that were positively shifted that we created, or negative smart replies, and measured, again, measured how the positive language that people produced in the interactions. I'm not going to go into results because we don't have time, but to summarize, both of those shows that there was a big positivity shift. It was mostly due to people using the Google Smart Replies. We did not really see it in replies that they typed in themselves, even when they had the Smart Replies, but I think a larger scale study is likely to expose the effect of this priming as well. By the way, at the end, I'll share a link to all the papers that I mentioned today. So there's some documented evidence for the positivity shift, but there is more than that. Here's a study that will use the known categories of text that people write about when they write their Airbnb host profiles. So this is from our 2017 work. Actually, Matt was there when we did this work at visiting Cornell Tech. We did an analysis first quantitative, but then computational, of what kind of stuff people put on the Airbnb profile. So based on that data, we had great training data. We can fine-tune a model to autocomplete sentences as you type in a new profile, autocompletes according to whatever category we chose. So we ran an experiment where some people we asked them to write the Airbnb host profile. Some of them got autocompletes from a model that was fine-tuned to provide work and education text. And the others were used autocomplete that was fine-tuned to do interest and taste, right? So work and education, something like, I work at Princeton. Interest and taste is like, I like playing the guitar or playing basketball or whatever. And indeed, those simple nudges, just the autocomplete nudges, shifted the number of words and sentences people wrote in the category where they were nudged, right? So when we had the model on the left that gave them suggestions around interest, they wrote a lot more words about their interest, than they wrote about work and education. And when they got the opposite, the work and education model, they did the opposite, right? They wrote more about work and education. So that simple nudge, we didn't ask them, just asked them at the same ask, right? The profile resulted in very different outcomes. Okay, that may have been just a simple nudge to make people write about certain topics more than others, but our most recent research showed that the nudge also works when people are expressing opinions and does even more than that. And here's the setup here. This is an experiment we ran very recently. And you can see it in the back, but I'll read it for you. We basically gave people a screen that looks like a Reddit post that asks them to discuss, is social media good for society? Right? So this is we tell them, oh, this is what somebody's post, and then this person said, we all use social media all the time, but social media is it good for us and for society? I'm having a hard time to make up my mind. What do you think? So we gave them this prompt. But when they typed in the response, they had, again, autocomplete. And autocomplete, you can see they're just typing something, it went like really quite long, after your regular 4 or 5 words. And those autocompletes had 3 different modes. We used prompt engineering with GPT-3 in this case, and the system produced either social media is good, autocompletes, social media is bad, autocompletes, or we had a control condition where we didn't get any recommendations. So one thing that we see, just like the previous case with Airbnb, we saw that content shift happen. So what we see in this figure is people that got social media as good suggestions, people that got social media as bad autocompletes, and the control that didn't see any autocompletes. And on the x-axis is the percent of the sentences that they wrote that expressed social media is good on the right, or social media is bad on the left. So you can see that people who got social media is good suggestions wrote a lot more social media is good content compared to the other 2 groups, and vice versa for social media is bad autocompletes. Right. So the content was significantly shifted. Yes. Question.
So I'm curious for the control. Is there a difference between like not showing any any suggestion, or showing sort of a neutral, like a suggestion that says, well, there's pros and cons?
Yeah, we definitely 2 comments to that. I don't know.
Excellent.
I suspect there will not be a difference. It will not shift the control much, but we definitely need to try that. But also important to say that our models would definitely, we're not saying that the models are biased, right? We're just exploring the potential of what happens when the models are biased. So in fact, in reality, most models, when you start with an argument that social media is good, they tend to build on to the same argument. Yeah.
Are the blocks, the size of the blocks, I think you said that they're measuring how much in that category the person wrote. Does that include the autocomplete text? Or is it how much they wrote independent of the autocomplete?
No, good question. It includes all the text that they produced at the end and said submit. Right. So we do haven't analyzed, but we do have exactly how much they actually wrote in autocomplete. And so we have that data, but this one is just what they accepted or what they produced at the end.
I think you can clearly show the content shift, but I'm wondering about the latent persuasion. Like, what's your sense of whether these people have actually changed their mind? Or maybe that's the next slide.
That's the next slide.
Ah.
And so they shifted their opinion, right? So we asked them at the end to say, do you think social media is overall good or bad for society? And the people who got the social media is good, much more likely to say much more likely to say the social media was good than the people who got the social media with bad recommendations and more than control. So what's more fascinating about this, that most of them, I think about 90%, I forget the exact number, we asked them, did you notice if the model was biased in any way? No. So they did not know they were being opinion shifted. Now, so we call this latent persuasion, right? They don't know what's going on. Like, it's not like they're being persuaded or they give an argument or they're asked to articulate an opinion, like they specific opinion on one side, they did not. One thing that we're doing now is we're trying to figure out if this lasts, right? If this effect, if we ask them 2 weeks later, they still think that this social media is good or bad. And also, we think this clearly works because we asked them about something that people have complicated and non-identity driven opinions on, right? If you ask them about climate change, we don't think they'll, in fact, we tried that and there was not any shift, right? They already have entrenched opinions, doesn't matter what the model suggests. So I don't think this is gonna completely nudge people in any direction we want for any topic, but things like that will definitely happen. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about this last final bullet here, but just to mention that a couple of studies from Hannah at Stanford showed that people still felt ownership about content that they wrote with the help of autocomplete, even, well, actually, only when they were experts on the topic, right? So when we asked them to write about a topic they were not experts on, they felt less ownership over the content that was produced than control. So in summary, it is a bit scary, right? We're deploying now the large language models at scale for various human communication tasks, but not only they change our language, they also have a chance to change our opinion, not just by the fact that auto-completing them, but also the second order effect. When we do autocomplete stuff, we produce more content that then appears in the web for future people, other people, or future models to read and be influenced by. Not to mention as well the relationship to the content that we produce in our ownership over it. Don't get too depressed, there's even more depressing stuff to come. So in the next part of the talk, I'd like to share some of the studies of how it shifts our social dynamics. So first, to look at studies around communication. So in this work, also by Jess Hohenstein at Cornell, she compares how humans attribute responsibility and perceived trust using a 2x2 design study. And the design was very cool. She had one of the people corresponding was actually a Confederate, right? So we worked with the research team. And the 2x2, they either use smart replies or not. That was a simple manipulation. And the other one, the conversation could have been successful or unsuccessful. And unsuccessful would just be declared by the Confederate who said, oh, we didn't reach the goal, or we didn't match what was needed. So they present an outcome. And first of all, one finding, the participant trusted the Confederate more in the AI condition, regardless of the conversation success. So it probably just helped the communication along. Maybe it was more smooth or faster, or some other reason. We're not actually sure why this happened. But then let me show you what happened when Jess asked participants about who was responsible for the success or failure of the conversation, right? The outcome, right? So what you see here on the y-axis is how much responsibility people assign to themselves or to the partner in the different conditions, right? So when the conversation was successful, no AI was involved, people shared the responsibility with the partner, right? So they say we're both equally responsible for the success. As is human nature, when it was unsuccessful, they blame the partner. Overwhelmingly, of course, this is still no AI. When we introduced AI, we had similar sharing of responsibility for success, right? Success, people said it was both us and the partner. But when the conversation failed, they actually assigned less responsibility for the partner, right? And Jess's thesis is that maybe the AI, in this case, took some of the blame. She called it the moral crumple zone, where AI takes some of the hit for the person using it. This was has inspired the title for the talk. So now we should talk about ownership and blame. I can explain, my AI must have been broken comment, right? It aimed to capture a future where, similarly to Jess study, people actively blame AI for conversations and communication failures. The other interesting thing about the title of the talk is that I didn't come up with it, GPT-3 did. I asked it to write a funny joke that is related to the text below, which was the abstract of the talk. And it gave me this. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. My AI must have been broken. So it's kind of funny, but if it was not funny, you know who to blame. So let me move on to talk about how it impacts way we form impressions about each other, and especially around trustworthiness. So I go back to the research mentioned earlier briefly. This is the research from Jess at Cornell. The randomized setup of smart replies to help two participants communicate about the policy issue. And reminder, before we looked at language and we saw that it was positive language shift, but we just also asked if it would change how they like the other person when the other person uses smart replies and when they think or suspect the other person uses smart replies. And it turns out that using the smart replies actually helped. Participant likes the other person more, like I mentioned before, maybe the conversation was more smooth or more rapid or easy. But that was without being aware of whether the partner actually used smart reply. When they did, when they thought they did, they felt less affiliation toward the conversation partner, right? When there was some suspicion that AI was helping in the communication. And in the next study, I'll describe in a little bit more detail. We designed to understand whether indeed the perception of AI use can shift the evaluation of others in the context of online self-presentation. And the basic research question was, will people evaluate the trustworthiness of the person differently if they think AI was involved in writing their online profile? This was our very first AI-Mediated Communication experiment back in 2019, led by my student Maurice. So for this, we did 3 online experiments. We had Airbnb profiles that were all human written, so it's hard to believe now, but in 2019, it was very hard for AI to actually produce a text that looks in any way reliably human. So we used all human written, and we just manipulated the participant to think that some of the profiles were written by AI or not written by AI, written by the human. And we asked for the trustworthiness ratings of the hosts, right, in each case. So this is what the participants in those experiments may have seen. So here they see what is a regular human written Airbnb profile, and we just added this generated profile labels sometimes in some of the experiments to some of the profiles when we ask for the evaluation. Before I tell you more about this, let's do a little exercise. We have 2 profiles here on the screen. One of them was written by a human and one of them was written by AI. And let's see if you can guess. I'll give you a minute to read and vote. You can use the barcode or go to slido.com and enter this number. actually, for people in the back, I'll read the text. So profile A, I'm a father of 2 boys in their 20s and 30s. I love riding my moto with my son and his family out in the city every day. I love to cook, especially Indian foods, arts, and music, and spending time with my family. Profile B says, Joel and Aaron love travel and have embraced it as Airbnb hosts and as travelers. We're easygoing, love hearing others' stories and getting to know the area that we're in. As hosts, we love sharing all the beautiful things to see and do in Colorado Springs. Which one is you? And people online, I don't know how many people we have online, but there are also, please also vote. Okay, we'll come back to that later. Profile A, profile B. Okay, back to the experiment where, as a reminder, we only had human written profiles. But nevertheless, when we asked people, we didn't tell people that, right? When we asked them if they think some profiles were AI or not, they actually had some conceptions, right? They had some idea, they thought they had some idea of what will be more human. So in this case, the profile that said, let me open with a huge hello. People tended to rate as more human, where things that sounded more formal, like hello, I'm Sebastian, originally from Germany, they thought is more AI, more consistently. There were other features, we'll come back to that later in the talk. So for the study, we took 30 profiles that we pre-tested. We knew that 15 of them looked more human and 15 of them looked more AI, all written by humans. And then every participant saw 10 profiles, and then they then rated for trustworthiness. So they saw 5 that were more had low AI-ness, that would look more human, and 5 that more AI ones. And then we had 4 experimental conditions. I'm going to tell you about 3 of them. We had the control where we didn't tell them anything. We said these are Airbnb profiles, just rate the trustworthiness. We had a condition where we told them some of these were written by AI, but we didn't label them. We didn't tell them which were written by AI. And we had a condition when we said some of them were written by AI, and we actually we said for the high, for the ones we knew looked like AI, we had the label that said generated profile. In fact, just as a side note, we didn't say AI. We used generated, or we didn't even use algorithm, I think, in the study to not, because we thought some people might have negative association with those words. So here's what happened. When people saw the profiles that were told were all human, they actually thought that the profiles that we knew looked like AI were a bit more trustworthy than the profiles that we knew looked human, right? So they rated them on average higher. This was just the plain version, right? They thought everything was human. But what happened when we told participants some profiles were written by AI? Already we started to see a shift when the things that we knew that might look like AI got a little bit of a hit, and the human-looking one got a little bit better. And it was even worse in the third condition where we labeled them, right? So the things that looked like AI that were more trustworthy before dropped in trustworthiness when they were labeled as written by AI. And in fact, it turns out that the suspicion of a profile was written by AI was enough to kind of drop the trustworthiness score. So here you see on the x-axis how much people thought from definitely human written to definitely AI generated a profile was written by AI, and the trustworthiness score that they gave that profile. So very quick drop, right, of things that, you know, we think maybe this is AI, and the trustworthiness drops already. So we gave it a name. We called it the replicant effect, with apologies to Philip K. Dick. Actually called it androids, but Ridley Scott, we called them replicants. In Blade Runner, our experimental world was full of humans and non-humans that were trying to present themselves as humans or imitated humans, and which were the replicants. And in such an environment, even suspecting that somebody was a replicant caused the trustworthiness rating to drop. And notice the collateral damage here, right? The fact that it was suspected to be a replicant doesn't mean that it was actually a replicant. It could have been a human that for some reason looked to the other participant as a replicant, which is what we'll do in the next study. Just a note, before that, there were some replications already of the replicant effect. That one was done in rating profiles that interestingly showed that trustworthiness dropped, but attractiveness didn't. You can interpret that in whatever way you want. And in email, right? So there was some effect of lower trust in AI email writers that are using AI. These are not from our group. In summary, I showed you more evidence that AI-MC stands to change the key aspects of human communication, how we relate to one another, and especially that in multiple contexts, the language suspected as AI can reduce the evaluation of the other's communication partner, especially in the context of trustworthiness. So that observation led us to the next little research adventure that asked the question of what makes people think that something was written by AI, right? So what, how to understand the perception of AI text. So one thing you could ask when you think about perception of AI written text is, can people detect language that was generated by AI? And I think I already hinted that they can't. There are a lot of studies already that showing that they cannot actually do it. They cannot do it in the context of news articles. They cannot do it in the context of poetry. They cannot do it in the context of journalist stories and recipes, reviews, even Shakespearean text. People just cannot tell the difference between AI and non-AI text. So we'll replicate these results in a second, but first I'll set up the question that we really ask, not whether people can detect text generated by AI, but when do people believe that language was generated by AI? So what makes them believe that? So we do it in the context of self-presentation, like the two things that the profiles that you've seen before. Answers still coming soon. But we're also asking, how do people decide whether a profile test has been written? So what kind of features they use to decide if a profile was written by AI or a human? And can we predict if a certain profile will be considered